Todd Durkin, welcome to the Victory Degree Podcast.
Nick, thanks for having me, man. Pumped to be here today.
Well, listen, I am equally as pumped. But Todd, for before we get started and before we start asking questions and getting into some of the things that make you great and some of the work that you've done with athletes and entrepreneurs and everyone in between, I figured for someone who might have clicked on this podcast, maybe my thumbnail was just great, or maybe the title was a real eye catcher. Why should people stick around and listen to what you have to say?
I would say get your mind right. Get your mind right. Someone want to get a mind right? Listen in. We're about to get people's minds right.
Love it. And what does that mean? Get your mind right. Like what is the
I think the biggest thing is like in the 20 something years I've been working with all the NFL athletes, UFC fighters, baseball, MLB guys. I mean, I've become known as a more of a mindset coach as well as a trainer, right? I started as a trainer, but in fostering relationships with some of the best athletes in the world, I really have dived deep into the mindset aspect, and I realized the importance of mindset. So what does it mean? It means of how do we win the battle between the ears on a daily basis? What can we do? What are the specific exacting steps that we can do to win that battle between the ears? I wrote a book on it, 2020, wrote that book called Get Your Mind Right. And what one could expect is really about what does it take on a daily basis to win the battle between the ears.
and what have you noticed people struggle with the most when it comes to mindset?
Well, self-talk, doubt, fear, scarcity mindset, all of these things hold people back. Sometimes even when people look good, there's insecurity or fear that's going on. There's something going on in someone's life like I had, like I share in one of my books called True Strength, when there's a lot of pain, like I had physical pain on my back and had my second knee replacement. I had a back injury that needed a 14-hour surgery on. This is just in 2021, 22. And like all these things are going on in people's minds. And the average person has 80,000 thoughts a day. This is fact, by the way, 80,000 thoughts a day, and up to 80% of those thoughts can be negative. So we realize nowadays adults have many times they have negative thoughts or they have negative mindsets or belief systems. And now kids, because of social media, on top of other things, are being fed a bunch of garbage. So that affects mindset. So to me, I'm like, let's strengthen these kids' mindsets up of how do we change America? How do we get into the bodies and minds and souls of people? Like change their bodies through working out and fitness. That's kind of the core of what I do. And then the mindset works hand in hand with that. And then obviously the spiritual side, the soulful side of how do we get people to be the best version of themselves.
You mentioned self-talk, and I was reminded of a study that was done out in Florida at a famous tennis center. And the name of the coach is escaping me, but essentially what they did is they hooked up a microphone to tennis players, and they requested that, every time a tennis player missed a shot or did whatever on the court, that they basically say out loud what they were thinking in their head. And so they recorded the entire session, and then they played back that audio to the tennis players, and the players couldn't believe that they had said some of the things that they did to themselves. You mentioned negative self-talk, and it's like they would miss a shot and they'd be like, "Oh, you stupid idiot! Why did you hit your backhand like that?" Or why aren't you better? And all these things, and just the exercise of them listening to themselves really opened up just how negative they were on the court. So I'm curious. Perhaps not all of us can walk around with a microphone strapped to our shirt, but in terms of fixing that negative self-talk, what's usually your go-to advice?
Well, it all comes from input, what's coming in. So you gotta start with what's coming in, and that's affecting your thought. So like this podcast right here, right now, whoever's listening in, my hope is that in the time that we have together is it's going to change the way you think. In the moment right now, if you start feeling like, man, I actually feel better. I feel a little more energized. I feel a little bit more like I can run through a wall. Well, it just shows you that what you listen to affects everything you do. I always say this is what you think in your head, your thoughts become your words become your flesh become your actions become your character becomes your legacy. Wait, all from your thoughts? Yeah. So how do you think differently? You listen to what you're listening to matters, what you're reading matters, who you're hanging out with and surrounding yourself with matters. So if you're around a bunch of losers or you're listening to a bunch of garbage music and you're not reading anything but Instagram scrolling or TikTok and that's it, then you can't expect to have a different result. You're not just going to like get lucky and the whole sphere of your success is going to change. It is a very specific, exacting choice that you have to make in order to feed your brain the right thoughts.
And yet, so many people shy away from mental discomfort. Like, I've certainly seen it where somebody will go through something and they are just stuck in the same loop over and over and over again. And I've always been curious why that is. My theory right now is, discomfort sucks, whether you're working out. That's why so many people hate working out and would prefer to take Ozempic, just a magic pill and lose weight. I maybe perhaps see a similarity with mental discomfort. Like, if you really want to change, it is difficult and it is going to take time. Um, is that, from your experience, why people stay the same or tend to not change? Or is there something deeper? Is it just that people hate discomfort?
Because people don't like to change.
Hmm.
Everyone talks about change. Everyone wants something different, but no one's willing to walk through the dirt, the grime, the stuff that it takes to actually change. Everyone wants to make more money. Everyone wants to work with the best people in the world or this or that. And then in order to get to where you say you want to go, that uncomfortable feeling that you're talking about, it's too far of a stretch. You're hitting your head against the upper limit syndrome, I call it. You hit your upper limit, whatever your upper limit is, and you can't get to the next level because your head keeps hitting that upper limit. So there's strategies and ways that you can blast through that. But when you ask like why that is because people don't like to change. They say they do, they don't.
So how would one blast through the upper limit syndrome? How would they get past that?
I mean, that's deep personal growth stuff that comes down to some of the ways I just said, including starting to write down. Like, I actually have a system. I coach people with, like, when you write these questions down about what you want out of your life. I mean, I've got a whole reverse engineer your system, life system that, like, when you write down what you want out of life and what you stand for and your core values and your beliefs and what you're going to add to your everyday routine, what you're going to delete and eliminate from your everyday routine, what you're going to eat, how you're going to train, who you're going to train with, all these questions, and you write it down. Writing creates clarity, clarity precedes genius. Writing creates clarity, clarity precedes genius. When you write it down, you start to live it and you pace it. And every day you read it. Every day you read it. Not like you write it down like whenever and that becomes it and you thinketh so you becometh. No, that's a bunch of hogwash. If you want to do it, yeah, you got to write it. You got to envision it. You got to actually get out away from your everyday routine and get in the mountains or go to the beach, and you got to feel it and see it. You got to develop that vision, and then you got to put yourself around people that are going to lift you up and encourage you to step into that vision of whatever that vision is. So it's very calculated, but it's not calculated. When I say calculated, there's things like the journaling and the writing that you can do and answer the questions, and then reinforcing it by your habits. I mean, literally from what you eat, what you drink, who you train with, how you train, what time you train. All of that is habitual, but at the same token, there's something called life that sometimes those curveballs and how you adapt to those curveballs and everything else certainly matter. But those are some of the ways I would say of like, man, like sit your booty down, get butt glue, answer the tough questions, and do something different. Like that's something you've tried in the last 5, 10, 20 years or your entire lifetime, and write down your biggest dreams and aspirations. Write down what you're going to potentiate, what you're going to create, what you're going to manifest, and see it, feel it. Like you gotta really start to become it, because it becomes your identity. And success is an identity. It's not just something you dream about. It becomes an identity of who you are. That success is your identity. And even when you fail or you slip up or you make mistakes, success is still your identity. And that's the stuff that I get into with my athletes and why a lot of the guys I've been with for a long time.
Yeah, I want to get to some of the work that you've done with athletes. What you just said reminded me of something that we had Merrill Hodge on the podcast, former NFL player, played for the Steelers, was an ESPN personality, and his mantra is find a way. And when he looks back on his life, all the hardships he went through, he would always tell himself, just find a way through it. You'll come out on the other side stronger than you were, before you went in. And that has stuck with me, because even if I go through some difficult times or something happens, I always tell myself, just find a way through it. Like there is a path. You just have to identify the path and then go down that path and figure it out. So finding a way for me has really opened up kind of this, this wide array of possibilities that I didn't know existed before. Yeah. So,
Good.
I mean,
Good.
yeah. Todd, some of the work that you do with your athletes. So just for people who might not be aware, you've worked with Drew Brees. Drew Brees calls you one of his best friends. You worked with Aaron Rodgers, Reggie Bush. You're currently working with Jordan Love and Brett Ripien. I'm curious. Now you're in this position. I'm sure you're very grateful for all the work that you've been able to do with them. But just before that, like, how did you get to where you are now? Like, how do you create those connections? How do you create that network? Kind of lead us through some of your own journey.
Yeah, that's a deep question, Nick. That's a deep question. I was a football player, so I always wanted to be the NFL quarterback. I grew up, went to college, and that allowed me to get my education. I went overseas, played in the World Football League. There I got injured my back, and that led me into fitness because my dream was shattered to be in the NFL. So 3 years into starting my business, I started my first gym called Fitness Quest 10 in year 2000. And I was 3 years in when I first started working with LaDainian Tomlinson, LT, Hall of Fame running back. He brought in his quarterback, Drew Brees, 3 weeks after he started working with me. Now I've been working with Drew for 22, 23 years on that. But in the athlete world, it's all word of mouth. It's all talking. So you got to get the first one. You got to find your first client, whoever that client is, even if it's a mom or dad. Get your first client. That leads to two leads to four leads to eight, right? So I've been blessed to have a lot of athletes, but majority of that is either word of mouth or any kind of PR that we've had because of those athletes, at least in the athlete realm, because some people think, oh yeah, you work with all the NFL athletes. Well, that's one of the things I do, right? I mean, I work with grandmas, and I work with one of the most illustrious pastors of our generation, and Pastor David Jeremiah, right? Like, people aren't like, hey, he trains pastors. I don't care what their title is. Like, I just love performance. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be a young boy or girl, or it could be a 83-year-old pastor. I just love helping people be the best version of themselves. So to me, that's how I got into it. And one thing led to the next, and that's how I got working with even our current guys now and my clients I work with now.
If you were to go back, to when you first started, and you had mentioned LT as your first client, what about your program specifically do you think stuck with LT, and why do you think it was so valuable for him to then go and recommend Drew Brees to come to you as well?
On day number one, I remember being nervous as heck. I was a young trainer, my first NFL athlete. So again, I had not worked with an NFL athlete, despite me being an athlete. This is a different level. And he said to me, I want to be one of the best running backs to ever play the game. And the way he said that, I thought to myself, I'm going to help this guy. I'm going to help this guy because I'm going to instill a belief in him that he is going to be the best to ever play the game. And I said, all right, take your shoes off. Let's do this balance test. balance on one leg for 60 seconds and touch the ground as many times, stand up, back and forth, one-legged balance touch test, 60 seconds on one side, 60 seconds on the other side. Takes his shoes off. Next thing you know, he's 30 seconds in, and he's just crushing it. And I'm like, man, that's pretty good. He got 32 on one side. That's pretty good in a 60-second period. All right, do the other side. The other side, he got 23. And he was bouncing all over the place and jumping around, and he was ticked off that he's like, man, I got 32 on one side and 23 on the other. And I said, LaDainian, think about this. If I'm a coach and I knew what I just saw, what would I do? Because what do you mean? I said, well, tell me something. When you're running a football, what side do you like to cut to? He closes his eyes like any great athlete would. He goes, he moves, he closes his eyes, and he cuts. And the way he cut was he was cutting off the same side that was more proficient. The side that he did 32 balance touch where the hip and everything was moving fluidly and gracefully, he got 32 on that side. I said, well, if I know you always love to cut to that direction, if I'm a good coach, I'm just going to take that side away and make you go the other way because you can't cut the same way. What if we can get that to where we're pretty darn close within 1 or 2 reps of each other on the same, on the left side and the right side. It don't matter which way you cut, left or right. You spin, you jump, whatever it is, they don't know where you're at. He's like, light bulb moment went off. I saw his eyes get really big, like, I found my dude, I found my spot. And for 9 years, we worked our tails off for one reason, to be the best to ever play the game. And whether he is or he's not, he's certainly now a Hall of Famer. He's one of the best, that's for sure. But it was that moment of, I was a nervous young trainer. Like, I didn't know. I just said yes to the opportunity. I'm going to work with this guy. I'm going to help him. And when he said, I want to be one of the best to ever play the game, I was like, man, God has an interesting plan, because I thought I was going to be the NFL quarterback. Now I'm helping this guy. Well, through our work over a few weeks, he's like, holy sheesh, if this team's going to be any good, I ought to get my quarterback in here. So then that's when Drew came in. And next thing, Drew, as a former quarterback, we hit it off. And, again, he's, as you mentioned, one of my best friends. He's someone that I've worked very, very closely with on a lot of levels. But for 20 years of his career, when it was time to grind, we grinded. Like, we worked like you don't see very often. Between, it was Drew, it was LaDainian Tomlinson, it was Reggie, it was Justin Peel, it was Derek Smith, it was guy Chase Daniel came in soon thereafter. I mean, there were guys that it was legendary.
I think people hear that NFL players, athletes in general, work hard, but I don't think they truly understand how hard they work and what hard work actually looks like. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit and give us a little glimpse into what that workout program truly was, and give me at least an appreciation for what hard work truly is?
I just wrote my 6th book called Coaching Greatness, and it's really a tribute to the coaches that I had the opportunity to coach under growing up and being a coach now. Because one of my 10 points I make about coaching greatness is great coaches coach their athletes hard. But in that section, in that chapter, I often talk about, I sometimes used to wonder, am I working these guys too hard? Am I training them too hard? I always liken an athlete, these level athletes, to like a thoroughbred, man. Like, they're like thoroughbred. I've used this analogy to them, is you're one step away from being euthanized. Like, you're one step away from not being in the NFL because of a devastating injury, right? So we got to make sure we do everything we can, we got to train to the brink of exhaustion and failure, but not so much you get hurt or have a higher likelihood of an incidence of injury. So to me, it's hard because it's somewhat subjective. Now it's a little more qualitative, and how we could look at the output that guys are doing. But I can say this: You get a group of thoroughbreds together and they're working out and they're being pushed and challenged to be a champion. There's nothing like it. And words can't describe what happens in some of those epic sessions. To this day, we still have some of those knockdown, drag out epic sessions where all I'm trying to do as a coach is to mimic the metabolic demands that one would face in that sport, in this case, football, and knowing what it's like to be on a 12 play drive and someone's trying to hit your head off and you're trying to think at the same time. It's not just doing an exercise, but when you're doing the exercise, you're being quizzed about check number 27. What's the check for 27? If you're on a 2 minute drill and you're marching down the field and you're exhausted, you just got hurt, your hamstring's hurting you, and you got to think of what the play just came in. Wait, they're checking the 27. There's a cover 2, and like all these synapses are firing in your brain. How can you physically prepare for that exact demand? So when you do it, you've already done it. You've already played the game 1,000 times before you played the game. You played the game, you're like, man, my training replicated this. That's what I've always tried to do with my guys. It's not just doing squats or cleans or bench press, or all those are great exercises, but it's really about using the demands of the sport and putting them under physical and mental duress so that the sport and the game itself, when they get to the game, they've already prepared for it.
What's your opinion on the flow state? I watched a video of Steph Curry explaining how, every shot that he's ever taken in a game, he's practiced at one point or another. And there's that famous clip of him dribbling through like 4 Clippers defenders and doing a step back and hitting a 3. And he's like, yeah, like I would set up chairs in practice and do that 1,000 times. And he describes being in the flow state where he's on the court. He's not thinking about where's my hand on the ball, is my form proper? He's just going out there and performing. So we can see that the flow state is real, but I'm curious what you've seen with that from your experience.
Well, I've experienced it firsthand. I've experienced it as a coach. I've seen it many, many times over the years. There's different progressions when learning a task or a skill. And part of that is when you're thinking about a skill, you're literally thinking about how to do the skill when you're learning it. Even as a young athlete, I remember going back when I was an athlete in high school and I played for a legendary football coach. Matter of fact, I dedicated my latest book, Coaching Greatness, to Coach Wolf. And I remember I didn't get yelled at much, but the one time I can vividly remember getting yelled at, I got absolutely blown up on an option play, and I came up with all this dirt in my face mask. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, Durkin, you're playing too robotic. You're playing too robotic. Now I'm giving my best Jersey accent. I've lost it since, but his point was I was playing robotic. I was playing too mechanical. I was thinking and deliberating too much. I wasn't playing at the speed of the game because I was thinking. Well, I was a sophomore then, and then as you get older, obviously you get more into the quote flow state. But as you learn new skills or you go against a higher level competition in college, pro, or Olympics, you have to really refine that skill to the point where you get that 10,000 hours of practice rule so that you can get into the flow state where it becomes mindless, where it becomes a beautiful dance and an art where you don't have to think, you're just flowing. So it takes practice. It takes sometimes being yelled at or being scolded or being pointed out to that. I 100% believe in it, but here's the bottom line. It's hard to get in the flow state even as a pro athlete. It's not every day even as a pro athlete because things are so reactive that you get in the flow state. The best in the world tend to find themselves more in the flow state more frequently, but even them, they're not always in the flow state. But that's what we all shoot for, is that when it almost becomes this weightlessness, you just feel like you're just out there floating and you're just shooting or you're throwing or you're running and you're moving and everything is just flowing. That's what we're all seeking and searching for in life. Like outside of sport, we're all trying to seek that flow state of that rhythm despite being busy, where it's this beautiful symphony of music that's playing. So to me, sports have always been a metaphor for life, and the flow state is something we all seek.
Was there anything specifically that you would add to a player's training program to try and promote that flow state in any way? I know you brought up the example of Drew Brees and trying to get him to to switch the plays while he's doing a an exercise or something. But I'm curious, like in terms of getting to that flow state, is there anything specific that these athletes could train on?
Well, there's a lot of different things. I mean, one of my roles as a trainer and coach have always been to put them in an environment that they're not comfortable in, or to give them exercise and drills that they're not used to. So, for example, it might mean a quarterback dropping back blindfolded, having to throw routes. Huh? What does that have to do with it? Well, if you can't see, which when you're I'll just say a 6 foot quarterback in Drew's case, and you can't see, how do you throw to spots? How do you throw to, right now, if I'm clapping and you're throwing an 18-yard comeback, 18 back to 15, and you're throwing to a clap, you have to go internal. You're not using your vision or your sight now to throw the ball, throw to an area, shoot a free throw, whatever it is. That's an example of how do you get someone to really go to the inside and feel the sixth sense. Man, he's got a sixth sense of that. It's a feel. How's he develop the feel? Well, maybe perhaps the athlete, whoever that may be, perhaps they've in some way trained that way. When we're doing card flips, which Ladain and I kind of made famous or infamous, doing card flips, I'd put fans on and the cards were flying in the air, and he had to go catch all these cards out of the air. And not just that, he was trying to identify, was it a six of spades, was it a nine of hearts? Like, he's trying to like really focus on that, because he had 1,000 yard catching season along with it, a couple thousand yards rushing season. So like, how do you focus on, all right, we got to get our hands even better, so we got to be able to focus on that. So there's specific exercises that you can do, obviously, almost to bring in that mental component, to get them to envision it. But when they're immersed in the activity, that's what really the flow state is when they're immersed and they can just flow and go, and then succeed at the mission.
I wanted to bring us to the topic of pressure, which I'm sure your NFL clients have experienced a fair share of. How do you coach on pressure? Because I think even for everyday people, we experience pressure in various forms, whether it's at work, whether it's maybe family pressures, friend group, whatever. Obviously, playing in the NFL might be a little bit different, and it's certainly a different type of pressure, or being a professional athlete. But just in general, how do you coach your clients to handle pressure?
Yeah, this is one that it doesn't matter if it's an athlete or if it's a life coaching client that I'm working with, an executive or leader. Yeah, I always entitle like pressure is a privilege, but how do we prepare for the pressure that's going to come before us? So pressure is a privilege. Well, what does that mean? The way you can counter any type of pressure is that the way you look at pressure is an opportunity. Like there's opportunity with pressure, and not everyone has the opportunity to work with pressure in a way that's going to provide a favorable outcome. So one of the best ways to work with pressure is your breath, doing breath work, so you can relax. And actually, when pressure arises, or what some would say is pressure, you can learn to not hyperventilate, because you could be the best athlete in the world and you're coming out of a tunnel with 80,000 people screaming, and you're so nervous that you're hyperventilating before the game even starts. That's a real thing. That's not that you haven't prepared for that, possibly, or you have, and we've gone through the visualization practices from going from the locker room, walking out the tunnel, being in the tunnel, hearing your name, and you've already practiced your breath work. You've already done some specific breath work. There's different types of breath work. You've already done different types of breath work to relax, so you can stay focused on the inside and not worry about all the extrinsic pressure that other people may be putting on you, the fans are putting on you. On that, it's just you and your task, and that's it. So the preparation of that would come down to breath work, visualization, and ultimately anticipating the best outcome. Versus the other way, you get tight, you get constricted, it affects your breath, and when it affects your breath, you get constricted, that affects your oxygen flow. Therefore, you're not going to maximize your physical performance because of the nerves and the angst that it may provide.
What about confidence? Confidence is often a term that I hear associated with pressure. What is confidence something that can be taught? Is that like an inherent trait? Like how can
100%.
one
100% it can be taught. I'm teaching my girls lacrosse team right now. My daughter is a junior in high school, and they're pretty good, but they're not great. And a lot of it's because of lack of confidence. I just went off yesterday on these girls about you can't just say, hey, you got to gain confidence. Okay. But if you're around confident people and you start to learn how to use the right positive self-talk, or when something goes wrong, you're like, flush it, girls, flush it. It's the same thing that Drew would say after he threw a pick, flush it. It's the same thing that Jordan says now if he throws a pick, flush. Like, how do you have such short-term memory that you're not holding on to stuff that's going to affect your performance? Same thing I'm telling my girls right now. Confidence is something that you can breed. Being around other confident people, not cocky. I'm just talking confident. An air, a body language. You've been around people yourself, Nick. I'm sure that you're just more confident around. It's how do you get around people that are going to bring out the best of you? Because if you show up as a confident man or a confident woman, you're more likely to succeed because you trust your preparation. When you trust your preparation, everything that you've been through in your own training, I'm specifically talking in sport here, then you go out there and you're going to be more confident because you're prepared for the defense, or you're more prepared that they're gonna have some wrinkle in their defense that you've already been through, schooled in, and everything else. So, to me, confidence is important. Confidence can be taught, or more importantly, can be caught. Confidence can be caught, right? Not just taught. Like I can talk about it. You got to feel it. You got to catch it. And next thing you know, you're using self-talk and mantras and all of that to be a more confident man or woman.
Yeah, we had Alan Stein on the podcast yesterday, and Alan's done some great work with famous athletes of his own, and he used the phrase "confidence is earned."
Mm-hmm.
Confidence is not something that just happens overnight. To your point, confidence is something that you earn with repetition, that you earn with by going out and doing the thing, taking action. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong is they just think that confidence is something that they can think about or that they can envision and it just happens. It's like, no, you have to go out and actually do the thing and prove to yourself that you can do the thing, and then confidence comes as a result of proving to yourself that you can actually perform.
Here's the important thing nowadays. Most people don't have enough confidence that they need to succeed because the world beats them down. Social media beats them down. We're constantly playing the comparison game of everyone else has got this, everyone else is better, because all you're doing is you're seeing other people's highlight reels. That's it. You see the highlight reels. So you're like, I'm not as good as her. I'm not as good as him. Man, that guy's talented. That girl, she is awesome. Like you're looking at this nonstop. So social media is really, it's a really dangerous thing because it can rob you of your confidence, right? Like because you're constantly playing that comparison game, and it is said what the comparison is a thief of joy. It's true that confidence it can be stolen from you because of your habits of your everyday habits of not only who you're around but what you're watching, what you're listening to. Same way if you are listening to your podcast, Nick, or my podcast, the Impact Show podcast, like you're going to be more confident. You're going to be around other confident people. Again, not cocky, but when you're hearing and saying and believing, like I just recorded a show a few weeks ago, and I was having them actually recite words that will breed confidence because it's said that the vibration when you say words like extraordinary, fantastic, super, super fantastic, awesome, marvelous, wow, all of those words, there's actually a positive vibration in your body that happens when you say that versus you start saying words that I won't say because I don't want you to think them or say them as you're listening in, is they'll actually have a negative frequency in your body. So if you're out in the field and you're trying to compete and you constantly beating yourself up about how good the other team is and how, man, we're making mistakes, and you're saying this to yourself, you're not going to be as confident because you're making mistakes. And of course, confidence breeds confidence as well as failure leads to failure.
That's I never thought of. I heard about write like people will write stuff down, and I'm not too sure what. I was actually thinking about this earlier today. I need to research what the connection is between, writing stuff down in the brain, because I've seen it everywhere and I've started doing it and it's helped a ton. There's some sort of connection there where if you just write stuff down, or if you talk about it, people always marvel at the power of something like therapy, right? But therapy in itself, the reason it works so well is because it gets you to talk. It gets you to put some of your thoughts into words. You just mentioned some of these words that can have a positive impact. And it all ties back to that self-talk. I'm curious, Todd, you mentioned social media, and it's something that we've talked about extensively. How has social media impacted athletes, and what have you seen from their perspective and how they're handling it? And I'll just say this for fans, it's so easy to go on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and Jordan Love has a bad game. You go on Twitter and you say Jordan Love sucks. Jordan Love is the worst, right? It's so easy, but we have no idea what Jordan's going through. We have no idea what his day might have looked like. I'm sure for an athlete, they go on Twitter, they see that stuff. It can't be certainly not a warm welcome. So I'm curious how you've seen social media impact athletes.
Well, to answer your first question is social media is a blessing and a curse. It's both. It provides great opportunity to also get great word and message out there, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of trolls out there that do nothing but beat on people, to your point, not knowing what is going on with someone, that their parent is struggling, or they're fighting cancer, or they just broke up with their girlfriend, or like so many personal things, and people are, they're hiding behind a platform and just shooting people down. If they were man enough to actually come to someone's face and say it, they would never do it. But behind social media, they can say what they think they can say whatever they want on that. So I always advise my athletes, don't go on social media, or don't read the comments. Like, don't read the comments, because bottom line is, if you're on social media and you're a public figure, you're going to get blasted at some point. You're going to have lovers, you're going to have haters, right? So I think there's a lot of blessings, though, too, for social media. I think the messaging, that if someone really does have a platform and wants to get it out there, you can do really good things. Or you hire a social media manager to do all your social media. Just don't look at those comments, because the comments will, again, there's clowns out there that are doing nothing but just absolutely annihilating people for the bad game or the missed shot. And is dangerous. The one thing I'll say, I was just talking to Brett Rippon about that this morning. I was training him, and he actually, for a time being, just got rid of social media because he was reading a book, which most people don't read books these days. He's like, I'm just like looking at my screen, all the screen time, and I'm scrolling, but I'm not reading. So he got this book, and the book is actually about social media and how the amount of time that we spend on social media it's affecting our focus time, our ability to think in long durations of time, because we think in now 15-second increments or 60-second increments, because we're programmed and we're being brainwashed the way that social media works on that. I thought that was pretty interesting because it's affecting our communication and how we communicate with future spouses, future teammates, future bosses or coaches, because like, young kids, and I've got 3 myself, talking a different language. Sometimes I'm at the dinner table with my kids and I'm like, what language y'all speak? Because I don't understand it. Like, it's a different language sometimes, which I'm always trying to stay fresh on the new lingo. But it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat. It's like, I think 54% of Americans read a book this past year. Which actually, now that I say that stat, I'm actually surprised it's even that high, because
Yep, me too. Me too.
I don't know a lot of people who read regularly. I mean, that stat is also, if somebody reads one book in a year, right, like they're part of the 54% or whatever. But
Right.
for people to actually read regularly, I wonder like how many people read 12 books, a book a month last year. Probably a
Right.
lot lower.
Yep. Yep.
So it's by the way, on the lingo front, my dad is the same way. He's trying to stay with the times, but it's hard. And then he'll oftentimes try to throw in, a word or something through text, I'm like, Dad, let's just maybe let's just not do that. Let's just stick to the thumbs up, and we're good.
100, 100.
Hundred.
Get it? I was gonna make 100.
I appreciate the effort, Todd. That's good. um, Todd, a couple more questions here, and then I want to get to your book, Coaching Greatness. I want to talk about Impact X, and then we'll close this podcast off here. I have to ask, just the NFL fan in me. I'm obviously a big 49ers fan, but I'm also just a fan of NFL athletes. And you've coached some of the best, and Drew and Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love now, and just everyone in between. LT. Are there any stories, any insights from coaching some of those guys that you could share with us today?
I got
Probably so many.
I got 25 years worth of stories, literally,
Yeah.
literally 25 years worth of stories. I mean, in what regard? In what regard stories?
I guess something that would, I think for us fans, like when we look at a lot of these athletes, for me, for a while, they just seemed almost alien. And I mean that in the best possible way, where they seemed, they were there to do a job. They did the job. They were amazing. But personality wise, I think we're starting to see that a little bit more now with social media. And, some athletes are coming out with shows and they're creating their own content. They have their own podcast. We get to see that side. But for someone like Jordan, right, who doesn't have a podcast, we don't really see that side of him, as an example, right? Like what is Jordan like off the field?
Right. I'll preface it like this. When you think of social media, the blessing, when I was growing up as a boy in New Jersey, there wasn't social media. And I lived in an area where there weren't athletes. So to find one of the New York Giants or New York Jets, you'd have to go drive an hour and a half and go to the game. Otherwise, you weren't seeing athletes. They weren't hanging out in my area. Now, everyone is just one step away. Pick up your phone and you can watch athletes train. Watch my stories. Like, you're seeing guys train. You're seeing guys go out at night. You're seeing, like, people's lives, like, all the time. That's a really new thing. Like, it's just in the last 10 years where, maybe 15, but I'll say 10, where even athletes were more comfortable with being filmed and all. So it is interesting. When you talk about stories, I'll just share maybe one or two to answer your question about Jordan, and something someone doesn't know. And I didn't know until last year. I started training him, and it was one of the last sessions before he went back to Green Bay for training camp. We were finishing up our session, and I was getting ready to do a podcast. And he's like, "What are you doing the rest of the day?" I was like, "I actually got to do a podcast." He's like, "What's your podcast on today?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have a foundation, and it's I'm giving back some money. We actually had a kid recently pass away of suicide." He's like, "Whoa!" And I saw like the energy shift. I'm like, "What's going on?" I didn't know this, but Jordan Love's father committed suicide, and I said, "Is this public knowledge?" He said, "Yeah, it's public knowledge. It's, I don't hide it. I haven't gone out and really shared a ton about it." But I said, "Man, Jordan," I said, "I'm so sorry to hear that, but think about the number of people that you can impact by you sharing the story. Because whether it be a father, whether it be a kid, you know how many kids have lost parents because of suicide?" And he was in high school when this happened. I didn't know any of this, right? So he had revealed it to me, and this is public, so I'm not revealing anything today that is not public knowledge. But I was saying to him, "Man, it'd be cool someday if you have a foundation, like we have the Impact Foundation of, the Love Foundation or whatever it is, and you can start giving back to, people who either have mental health or suicide prevention, things like we have with our Impact Foundation." And he's like, "Yep, we're working on it." And I share that because that's a story that most people don't know. Is here's a guy who is out there busting his tail, training hard. He's with his teammates. Here's a guy like he grew up without a dad after high school. Like he didn't have a father, and you know that's a really important aspect of his life. Similar story. Drew Brees, Super Bowl year 2010. The summer before that season, I get a call on the start of training camp that Drew's mother just passed away of suicide. So Drew Brees' mom committed suicide. Most people don't know that. That was his Super Bowl year. So these stories aren't always the good ones. I share it because you only see what you see on TV. But what you see with those two men are what you see is what you get. That is the same year that 6 months later Drew won the Super Bowl. But he was tormented by a lot of pain on the inside. That was his mother who happened to take her own life. And here he is, has to play an NFL season in front of millions of fans. And if he had played like crap and people are like, oh, Drew, you stink, you can't throw, like, da, 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 da. No one knows that his mom just died. Now he wrote a book about it and included in the book, Coming Back Stronger, about that. But, you know, I've had an inside look at some of this stuff. And I see these men as real men like anyone else with their own set of personal problems. Everyone's got something, Nick. Everyone's got something. On the outside, you see people on TV like, oh man, isn't he lucky making $50 million a year? Yes, he is. But guess what? He's got something really big going on too, right? So everyone's got something.
I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing that. Second of all, so the reason that I wanted to ask you about these, about stories that you might have from these athletes is because for the very reason that you just laid out, where we see them on TV, and that was my impression for a while. I mean, I even admitted to it. We see them on TV. We just see them as players who are playing the game, and if they mess up, it's this big, huge thing, and our team loses, and naturally we're all selfish. So then we go to social media and berate them, or in our inner circles, we're talking poorly about them and all this stuff. And oftentimes we forget that these are these are people, to your point, with some of them, with real problems, obviously with feelings, it's just that personal aspect of it all, I think, gets lost. And I was reminded of that twice this past year. When Deebo Samuel got traded, he went on Players Tribune and he wrote this big, huge post about how much San Francisco meant to him and how how much of a blessing it was for his family. Meanwhile, 3 months earlier, I certainly did it. I was like, hey, what's happening with Deebo? Why is he not performing? Oh, he looks fat. He could lose some weight. And then after reading that article, I almost felt bad, in that moment, because I was like, damn, here's a guy with real feelings who called San Francisco home, who was fighting through some of his own personal stuff. And another example, Charvarius Ward, our cornerback, his newborn daughter passed away in the middle of the season. And he openly came out and said that one of the main reasons why he wanted to leave San Francisco was there was just too much PTSD associated with the team, with the area, with the passing away of his daughter. And it just puts things into perspective, right? Because here I am complaining about Charvarius Ward maybe allowing a 9-yard slant. Meanwhile, his newborn daughter passed away. And I'm sure his mind was not right during the game. Nobody's mind would be right after something like that for at least a period of time. So that's the reason I try to bring out these stories, because I think it helps people understand and gain that appreciation that, hey, yes, they're playing for your favorite team. Yes, winning feels good. You want to brag to your friends that your team has the most Super Bowls, or that your team is on top, or whatever, that you have the best player. But guess what? At the end of the day, like, these are players with families and with real stuff going on.
And at least the guys I've worked with, I'll tell you what, when it comes to military, man, and I love this. These guys do things that no one would know. No one would ever know. And this goes way back to when we started taking our guys once a semester or once a summer out to the military bases, and we'd have a practice out there, and we'd have the fields lined with all the military men and women and their families. I've seen with my own eyes 2.5 hours after that session ends, my guy is still standing signing an autograph. 2.5 hours after the training's done. They're like, we're not leaving until every autograph is signed. Why doesn't that make ESPN? Why doesn't that make the news? Doesn't. But as soon as something stupid happens, that makes the news. But you got someone that's 2.5 hours after a training session saying, nope, I'll sign every autograph of these men who fight for our freedom and allow us to do what we do. Now, somebody might be like, well, they should. They're making millions of dollars. That's not in their line of duty that they have to sign everything. That's just because they're good men who want to do good because they appreciate and respect our United States military. And I've seen it for years and upon years of they will not let a single military man or woman go with an unsigned either jersey or an autograph, period. And like those are stories you never hear about. And I'm like, man, this is good stuff.
And Todd, to that point, I think that's a big thing that's wrong with sports media nowadays, because while, an NFL player, to your point, is spending 2.5 hours signing, everyone's autograph from the military, ESPN is arguing about, who's better, Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, or they're arguing about LeBron James or Michael Jordan, right? And they're not covering the real stuff. And so, I mean, they have their own stuff, and listen, that stuff gets clicks. At the end of the day, they're a media business. They want to get views. That's how they make their money. That's fine. But I think there's a whole different dimension to all of this that shows athletes as something more than just a clickbait title.
Preach.
And one name that comes to mind is Aaron Rodgers. So I recently found out through Ian O'Connor, who wrote a great book on Aaron. Say what you disagree, agree with whatever you think about Aaron Rodgers. I don't care. I read a lot of great stuff in that book, a lot of the great charity work he's done, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that he's done that he never talks about openly, that he never mentions. And a lot of stuff that he's done for his high school, his alma mater back in Fresno. And, obviously he had his own struggles with family and whatnot, but there's a guy that if you just read ESPN or if you just watched, certain videos, you'd be like, this is the worst, worst person ever.
Right.
But you don't see the stuff that he does behind the scenes. So was that the impression that you got from Aaron with your time with him, or?
Yeah, I mean, he was here a Super Bowl year. The year before Super Bowl, he trained with me, and he was young in his career then. He was learning the ropes on that. Had just taken over for Brett a few years prior, but that was his Super Bowl year, and he was impressionable. He definitely wanted to learn and do that. And obviously after 20 year career or whatever it is, he played a long time too. But he got a lot of snaps under his belt.
Yeah. Todd, as we wrap up here, I want to bring up, you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, your book Coaching Greatness that just came out. The premise behind the book, why write it, and then a follow-up to that. I'm curious some of the coaches that have inspired you and what you've learned from them.
Well, I wrote it because for being a trainer and coach for 25 years and having worked with a lot of different athletes. See, when football is in their off season, I'm in my in season. When baseball is in their off season, I'm in my in season. So I go between football and baseball guys, and then I obviously got my fighters, the UFC guys too. I've seen a lot of different men and women come through the doors, not just athletes. But to me, a coach is a coach, and a coach is someone who really impacts someone and mentors people. In a time right now that I feel everyone needs a coach in some way, business or life or spiritual or fitness. Like, I think all of us need the accountability to have a coach. And that's because I've always had a coach and I know the value of a coach. So I wrote this book really as a tribute to my greatest coach I've ever played for, Coach Wolf. And I say the greatest coach because no one's probably ever heard of Coach Wolf unless you're from Brick, New Jersey, and know the impact that that man's had with umpteen state championships and conference championships and everything else. You might say a John Wooden, who many would say is the greatest coach of all time, or I could put the laundry list, which I put in the book, of other great coaches that do exist. But a great coach is someone who's impacted you as a man or a woman. And my plea on this is that all of us are coaches too. We're all influencers as parents, as a mom or a dad, or as someone who volunteers for the local soccer team or lacrosse team, or you actually are a coach, a sport coach or a fitness coach or a business coach or a life coach. Heck, I have my own life coaching certification program now with 65 life coaches. And we're coaching people all over the country, both at the executive level, CEO level, as well as fitness professionals who own gyms. And when I look at coaches and what they do, um, I just can't imagine life without having a coach. I believe everyone needs a coach. So I wrote this book as a tribute to Coach Wolf and all the coaches out there who I know or have worked with, um, who do great things to put more light into the world. And that's what this book is about, including I included 21 coaches from my coaching tree that each wrote a chapter after I wrote my entire book. 21 of the people whom I've impacted as a coach wrote their chapter on greatness and what coaching means to them. So it's kind of a special legacy type book um, on that. So I'm really excited. Coaching Greatness just came out. It's already number one bestseller on Amazon. It's taken the country by storm in the coaching side of things because I think it's written with a lot of heart and soul, and it's going to help a lot of coaches, parents, and athletes also.
And this is your sixth book, right?
Number six.
Did you
Number
ever think
six.
you'd write six six books?
I only wanted to write one, and some of the fruitions of life have brought me into now six, and I don't think it'll be my last one. Although I don't have any I'm working on now. I just wrote this one. Um, I really enjoy the process of writing. Um, I look at writing as a legacy play kind of thing. Like maybe someday when I'm long gone, between my books and that, it's more than just a story. It's in paper. It's etched in stone, so to speak. Um, so again, you talk about coaching. Part of coaching is, I think, passing down wisdom on that. And I talk specific X's and O's in there too, you know, like I'm going through these sessions with my guys. Am I training them too hard? Should I lighten up the load and let them recover? And like I'm going through the mindset of a coach when I'm training some of these guys that you've heard and you mentioned already, and then some and some of the stories in there of as a coach, how do you ultimately get the most out of your athlete as an athlete, but also as a person, and how do you measure a coach's success? Right? How do you measure a trainer's success? Is it because of they won a certain amount of times or they got inducted into Hall of Fame? Is it because they invited you to their wedding? Is it because they invited you to a dinner with their spouse? Like how do you measure? Like what really is that measurement? And to me, it's not about just getting invited to a certain event or that. But at the end of the day, it's knowing that you made an impact on that man or woman to help them become the best version of themselves.
I lied. I have one more question. You just reminded me. Legacy. Um, how much have you seen your clients think about legacy? Because I imagine, they're obviously thinking about being the best version of themselves, but also what type of legacy are they going to leave on the game? Is that something that's top of mind for them?
Definitely not top of mind. It is said that before age 50 you seek legitimacy, after age 50 you seek legacy. And I don't think that 50 is the magic number, that after 50 you seek legacy. And you could be 35. I remember thinking that when I was 35, 40 years old, thinking, hey, I'm seeking legacy too right now. And I'm now in my early 50s. I'm like, man, I need to seek more legitimacy. I'm not done yet. I got a lot to prove still. Right. So I feel like you mentioned Impact X Performance. I just launched the franchise last year, 2024, and we're going strong. It's like, man, this is a 3 to 5 year lift. We're creating lighthouses all over the country. We got fitness and sport training and recovery and life coaching all under one roof. And like, man, we got a long way to go before we get to where I want to go. And, you know, I don't think they spend a lot of time thinking about legacy, but what I always say is this: the decisions you make today are ultimately going to form who you are tomorrow. The choices that you make today and tonight are going to help you become the man or woman that you're supposed to be. So make the right choices, make the right decisions. Whether you're 18, whether you're 25, whether you're 40, whether you're 53, or whether you're 83, make the right choices.
Love it. Todd, real quick, Impact X, you just mentioned that we talked a little bit about it, but what's the goal with it, and kind of where do you see it in 5 years from now?
Whew.
Loaded question.
Well, it is because it, I'm a man of faith, and it came off of a very difficult time after the pandemic when, after a lot of success in the fitness field and training these athletes, there was a voice inside of me that wanted to go to a deeper level. I didn't know what that deeper level was, but it takes me back to what LaDainian said in 2006 after winning that MVP. What's next? What's next? I'm like, what do you mean, what's next, LaDainian? We run it back. We do it again. And the look on his face, I knew that it wasn't sinking in. I'm like, run it back. And it wasn't registering. I didn't know until this experience with me in 2020 through the pandemic, and I had my second knee replacement. My back went out. I got diagnosed with sleep apnea and all this other stuff. And next thing I know, I I'm thinking, man, like, what's the next step? Well, for me, when I came out on the other side in 2024, I said, I finally got healed of all that stuff with all the injuries and surgeries and everything else. And let me just put this here, make sure my computer is plugged in. Um, is what's it going to take? Um, I had this vision, and it literally was a vision from above that I don't need to not only, because I had contemplating like taking a major sabbatical of everything. And when I got my health and energy back to where I needed it to be, I say, no, now's not the time to retire. Now's the time to rewire and go deeper than ever before and make a legacy play. And for the next decade, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my expertise and 25 plus years of knowledge on the training space, and I'm gonna work and mentor young men and women who want to be business owners. And what I want to do is I want to take this fitness and sport training and recovery aspect, and I'm going to open up shops around America, and we're going to become lighthouses. And the lighthouses are going to really help design that in the good times and the bad times, people come to the sanctuary to come train. They come get recovered. They come get mindset training and mental training. And each of these places is going to be the most positive place on the planet. Like, you go in there, you know something's different. And in the last just about year now, Nick, that's what I've been doing. We've got 7 locations nationwide. I've got goals to open up 25 in 2025 here. So I'm seeking out people who want to put lighthouses in their community, want to open up gyms and recovery shops using all of my experience and systems that I've developed in my time and the mindset of what it takes. Drew has been helping me with this. Drew is a big franchisor and has been helping me with this endeavor. And it's been awesome to do this and see the lives that we're changing. A couple hundred people per community, times it by 105 years. And whatever the good Lord has planned for us, then I'm on for the ride. But I've been real blessed, brother. I've been real blessed because 5 years ago, I didn't see that. I had one shop, and that's all I wanted until I went through a physical challenge that I had never been through before that ultimately took me to a deeper level that is called Impact X Performance.
Love it, Todd. I mean, you've graced us with an hour of your time, which we cannot be thankful enough for. Before we leave, anywhere, where can people find more of your work, and where can people connect with you?
Website, ToddDurkin.com, or ImpactXPerformance.com. ImpactXPerformance.com. If you're like, man, I want to learn more about that, there's ImpactXFranchise.com, which is if like, hey, maybe I want to bring a lighthouse to my community. ImpactXFranchise.com has that. Listen, I'm on Instagram. I love Instagram. I spend too much time on Instagram. So you can follow me just at my name, at Todd Durkin. So it's 3Ds, Todd, Durkin. And DM me if you want. I'm on there daily most times. So you can always DM me. Check that out there. But any of those websites there, Nick, great way to get a hold of me. I'm accessible. As Dion would say, you know where to find me.
Love
I'm
it.
not hard to find.
Love it. All of Todd's links will be in the description of this episode if you want to check out more of his work alongside ImpactX, performance.com, and all those other links will be in there. Todd, you got me real excited about this ImpactX stuff that you're doing. Let me tell you. So
thank you.
If you don't already have one in Orlando,
we need one. We need one in O-Town. My daughter, my mom's there. My sister's there. I got family in Florida. We got to get Florida, baby. Love Florida.
You gotta get Mickey and Minnie thinking right out here. So
yeah, exactly. Get a fire. Hey, listen, there's a lot of people that need a lot of help when it comes to mindset, and it all starts with the physiological state. I always say if you want to change your psychological state, your mindset, you got to change your physiological state. By changing your physiological state, you change your psychological state. So I think the combination between the training and the recovery, cold plunges, saunas, all of our vibroacoustic chairs, all that stuff, are great ways to really tap into the science and technology that exists today under a state-of-the-art training facility. So ImpactX Performance, baby. It's coming your way.
Love it. Are cold plunges real, by the way? Because I've seen some. Well, the only reason I ask is because I've seen people online say, well, they don't really work, or they're phony, whatever. But
listen, I know a lot of people, military, former military, PTSD, police that have had serious PTSDs, depression, who swear by cold plunge, swear by it because of the physiological effects. Again, affects the psychological makeup, and there's a lot of science that proves that. So 100%, it's real.
Love it. Well, on that note, cold plunges are real. And Todd, you've been awesome, man. Thanks again for your time, and let's definitely stay in touch.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate you.